Question 1. The control framework reveals that a financial services organization is implementing a new Workspace ONE integrated solution to provide secure access to sensitive customer data. The organization requires that access to these applications be granted only when devices are compliant with corporate security policies, including up-to-date operating systems and active endpoint protection. The IT team is considering several approaches to enforce this requirement. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of secure and compliant Workspace ONE integration for this scenario? Option A. Implement Workspace ONE conditional access policies that dynamically assess device compliance and user context before granting access to applications. Option B. Rely solely on network-level firewalls to restrict access to the sensitive data applications, assuming that only compliant devices will be on the corporate network. Option C. Disable conditional access checks for a specific group of power users to streamline their workflow and reduce administrative overhead. Option D. Instruct end users to manually verify their device compliance before attempting to access sensitive applications, with no automated verification. The correct answer is A. Implement Workspace ONE conditional access policies that dynamically assess device compliance and user context before granting access to applications. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in advanced Workspace ONE integrations, balancing the need for granular access control with the operational overhead of managing complex conditional access policies. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misconfiguration can lead to either security vulnerabilities, overly permissive access, or user productivity issues, overly restrictive access. Careful judgment is required to align technical implementation with business requirements and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages Workspace ONE native conditional access capabilities to enforce security policies based on device posture and user context. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and ensures that access to sensitive corporate resources is granted only when specific security criteria are met. This approach is compliant with general data protection and security best practices, which are implicitly expected within the scope of a professional IT certification like 5V0-62. 19. Even if specific regulations are not explicitly cited in the exam syllabus, it promotes a proactive security posture by dynamically assessing risk. An incorrect approach that relies solely on network-level controls fails to address the inherent risks of compromised endpoints or unauthorized user access from within the network perimeter. This is a regulatory failure as it does not adequately protect corporate data from unauthorized access or disclosure, potentially violating data protection principles. Another incorrect approach that involves disabling conditional access for specific user groups to simplify management is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It creates a security loophole, exposing corporate data to higher risk and potentially violating compliance mandates that require consistent security across all user populations. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence in security design. Finally, an approach that delegates the responsibility of device compliance to end users without robust verification mechanisms is also professionally unacceptable. This introduces a high degree of risk due to potential user error or deliberate circumvention of security policies, leading to potential data breaches and noncompliance. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes security and compliance from the outset. This involves understanding the specific security requirements of the organization, mapping them to Workspace ONE capabilities, and iteratively testing and refining policies. A risk-based approach, where potential threats are identified and mitigated through policy design, is crucial. Regular audits and reviews of access policies are also essential to maintain an effective security posture and ensure ongoing compliance. Question 2. The review process indicates that the current onboarding workflow for new users into Workspace ONE is experiencing significant delays and a high rate of manual intervention, impacting productivity and user satisfaction. Which of the following approaches best addresses this process optimization challenge? Option A. Rely on the anecdotal feedback from a few IT team members who believe they know the quickest way to onboard users to bypass the current system. Option B. Focus solely on upgrading the underlying infrastructure components supporting Workspace ONE, with the expectation that this will inherently improve the onboarding process without directly addressing the workflow itself. Option C. Immediately implement a new, more complex automated provisioning script for user onboarding, assuming it will resolve the delays without further investigation into the root causes of the current issues. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of the existing onboarding process, mapping all steps, identifying bottlenecks through data collection, and engaging key stakeholders, IT administrators, help desk, end users, to gather feedback before designing and implementing targeted improvements with a pilot phase and post-implementation review. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of the existing onboarding process, mapping all steps, identifying bottlenecks through data collection, and engaging key stakeholders, IT administrators, help desk, end users, to gather feedback before designing and implementing targeted improvements with a pilot phase and post-implementation review. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where the rapid adoption of new technologies, such as advanced Workspace ONE integrations, can outpace established operational processes. The core challenge lies in balancing the drive for innovation and efficiency with the need for robust, auditable, and compliant operational procedures. Without a structured approach to process optimization, the organization risks introducing security vulnerabilities, operational inefficiencies, and potential noncompliance with internal policies and external regulations, even if not explicitly stated in the exam's jurisdiction. The principle of due diligence and risk management is universally applicable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, iterative improvement cycle that involves understanding the current state, identifying bottlenecks, and implementing targeted changes with measurable outcomes. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and process engineering, emphasizing a data-driven and user-centric methodology. By involving stakeholders and validating changes, this approach ensures that optimizations are effective, sustainable, and do not introduce unintended negative consequences. This proactive and structured method is crucial for maintaining a secure and efficient Workspace ONE environment, reflecting a commitment to operational excellence and risk mitigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach might involve immediately deploying a new integration without a thorough review of existing workflows. This bypasses critical risk assessment and validation steps, potentially leading to security gaps or operational disruptions. Such an approach fails to adhere to principles of change management and due diligence, which are fundamental to maintaining a stable and secure IT infrastructure. Another incorrect approach could be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a few individuals, without objective data or broader stakeholder input. This subjective method increases the likelihood of implementing ineffective or even detrimental changes, ignoring the diverse needs and impacts across the organization. It also undermines the transparency and accountability expected in professional IT operations. A third incorrect approach might be to focus solely on the technical aspects of the integration, neglecting the impact on end-user experience and support processes. This narrow focus can lead to solutions that are technically sound but operationally burdensome or confusing for users, ultimately hindering adoption and negating the intended benefits. It demonstrates a failure to consider the holistic impact of process changes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to process optimization, starting with a clear understanding of the current state and desired outcomes. This involves engaging all relevant stakeholders, gathering objective data, and employing a phased implementation strategy with continuous monitoring and feedback loops. The decision-making process should prioritize risk assessment, compliance, and measurable improvements in efficiency and user experience. When faced with the need to optimize, professionals should ask, what are the current process metrics? What are the specific pain points and their root causes? What are the potential risks and compliance implications of proposed changes? And how will the success of the optimization be measured? This systematic inquiry ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational goals and best practices. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates a strong emphasis on data privacy and security for sensitive customer information accessed via mobile devices. As a Workspace ONE design and advanced integration specialist, you are tasked with designing an integration strategy that allows access to these sensitive applications from both corporate managed and BYOD. Bring your own device. Endpoints. The regulatory framework mandates that data access must be strictly controlled based on device compliance and user role, with a clear audit trail of all access events. Which of the following integration approaches best aligns with these regulatory requirements? Option A. Implement granular access policies within Workspace ONE that dynamically assess device compliance status and user role before granting access to specific applications and data, ensuring all access events are logged for auditing. Option B. Configure Workspace ONE to allow unrestricted access to all sensitive applications from any device, regardless of management status or compliance, relying on application-level security for protection. Option C. Deploy a broad policy that blocks all access to sensitive applications from any device not fully managed by the organization, without exceptions for specific user roles or justified business needs. Option D. Utilize a third-party solution to encrypt all data at rest and in transit, but bypass Workspace ONE compliance and role-based access controls to simplify the user experience. The correct answer is A. Implement granular access policies within Workspace ONE that dynamically assess device compliance status and user role for granting access to specific applications and data, ensuring all access events are logged for auditing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, balancing robust security controls with user productivity and data privacy. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the specific regulatory framework governing data handling and user privacy within the context of a Workspace ONE deployment. The chosen regulatory framework for this exam is not explicitly stated as a specific country's law, but implies adherence to general principles of data protection and security, as would be expected in a professional IT context. The complexity arises from the need to implement technical controls that satisfy these requirements without unduly impeding legitimate business operations or violating user privacy expectations. The absolute priority of jurisdiction requirements emphasizes that compliance is non-negotiable and forms the foundation of any design decision. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a granular, policy-driven implementation of security control that aligns with the principle of least privilege and data minimization, as mandated by data protection regulations. This involves defining specific access policies based on user roles, device compliance status, and the sensitivity of the data being accessed. By leveraging Workspace ONE capabilities to enforce these policies, the organization ensures that only authorized users on compliant devices can access specific applications and data, thereby minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or data leakage. This approach directly addresses regulatory concerns around data security and privacy by embedding compliance into the core of the Workspace ONE architecture. It represents best professional practice because it is proactive, adaptable, and demonstrably compliant with the spirit and letter of data protection principles. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a blanket, overly restrictive policy that blocks all access to sensitive applications from unmanaged devices, regardless of user role or specific need, is a regulatory failure. This approach is overly broad and can lead to operational inefficiencies, potentially violating principles of proportionality and necessity in data protection. It fails to consider legitimate business use cases and may inadvertently restrict access for authorized personnel, creating a compliance risk if business operations are significantly hampered without a clear, justifiable reason. Adopting a laissez-faire approach where minimal security controls are applied to unmanaged devices, relying solely on user awareness, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes the duty of care to protect sensitive data and user privacy. It exposes the organization to substantial risks of data breaches, non-compliance with data protection laws, and reputational damage. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established security best practices and regulatory mandates. Implementing security controls that are technically complex to manage and audit without a clear understanding of their impact on user privacy and data access is also problematic. While seemingly security-focused, if these controls are not well-defined, documented, and aligned with regulatory requirements, they can lead to unintended consequences, such as data access being inadvertently blocked or user privacy being compromised through excessive monitoring. This approach lacks the necessary rigor and foresight to ensure compliant and effective deployment. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework and the organization's specific data protection obligations. This involves identifying sensitive data, understanding user access needs, and assessing the risks associated with different deployment scenarios, particularly concerning managed versus unmanaged devices. The design process should then translate these requirements into granular Workspace ONE policies that enforce the principle of least privilege and data minimization. Regular auditing and review of these policies are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. This systematic approach ensures that security measures are effective, proportionate, and compliant, fostering trust and protecting both the organization and its users. Question 4. The audit findings indicate a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a third-party application deployed via VMware Workspace ONE to a significant portion of the managed device fleet. The vulnerability could allow for unauthorized data exfiltration. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to mitigate this risk? Option A. Initiate a phased deployment of an updated version of the vulnerable application through Workspace ONE, targeting specific user groups for initial testing before a wider rollout. Option B. Immediately disable the application entirely across all managed devices to prevent any potential exploitation until a permanent fix is developed. Option C. Implement a temporary, system-wide security policy that blocks access to all third-party applications until a comprehensive security audit of all installed software can be completed. Option D. Manually uninstall the application from each affected device and instruct users to reinstall it once a patch is available. The correct answer is A. Initiate a phased deployment of an updated version of the vulnerable application through Workspace ONE, targeting specific user groups for initial testing before a wider rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, where a critical security vulnerability is discovered in a widely deployed application. The professional is tasked with mitigating the risk while ensuring minimal disruption to end users and maintaining compliance with VMware's recommended practices and potentially internal IT policies. The challenge lies in balancing immediate security needs with operational continuity and the complexities of advanced integrations within Workspace ONE. The need for a rapid, yet controlled, response is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace ONE capabilities for targeted application remediation. This includes identifying the affected devices and users, and then deploying a patch or an updated version of the application through Workspace ONE application management features. This method is best professional practice because it directly addresses the vulnerability at the application layer, which is the source of the issue. It allows for phased rollouts, testing, and rollback capabilities, minimizing the risk of widespread service disruption. Furthermore, it aligns with the principles of secure application lifecycle management, a key aspect of advanced Workspace ONE integration. This approach also implicitly adheres to the principle of least privilege by only affecting the necessary applications and devices, rather than a blanket system-wide change that could introduce new risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling the application entirely across all devices without a clear understanding of its criticality or providing an alternative is a regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in assessing the impact of the remediation. This approach could lead to significant business disruption, potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, or internal operational policies. It also fails to provide a timely and effective solution for users who rely on the application. Attempting to manually uninstall and reinstall the application on each affected device is an inefficient and unscalable approach. This method is prone to human error, is time-consuming, and does not leverage the automation capabilities of Workspace ONE. From a compliance perspective, it indicates a failure to utilize the intended management tools, potentially leading to inconsistent remediation and an inability to accurately report on the security posture. It also bypasses the controlled deployment and testing mechanisms inherent in Workspace ONE. Implementing a system-wide security policy that blocks access to all applications until a full audit is completed is an overly broad and disruptive measure. While security is important, Such an extreme action would cripple business operations and is not a proportionate response to a specific application vulnerability. This approach fails to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of risk management and the capabilities of Workspace ONE to address specific threats without causing undue harm. It also likely violates internal IT policies regarding application availability and user productivity. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to security incidents. This involves 1. Incident identification and assessment, quickly understanding the nature and scope of the vulnerability. 2. Impact analysis, determining which users, devices, and business functions are affected. 3. Remediation planning, developing a strategy that balances security, operational continuity, and user experience. 4. Controlled deployment, utilizing management tools like Workspace ONE for phased rollouts, testing, and monitoring. 5. Verification and monitoring, confirming the effectiveness of the remediation and ongoing monitoring for any residual risks. This structured approach ensures that security measures are effective, efficient, and compliant with best practices and regulatory expectations. Question 5. The assessment process reveals that a financial services organization is implementing VMware Workspace ONE to manage a fleet of corporate-owned and BYOD devices for employees accessing sensitive financial applications. The organization has strict data segregation requirements and needs to ensure that only authorized personnel can access specific financial data based on their role and the compliance status of their device. The current implementation grants broad access to all financial applications for all users, regardless of their role or device compliance. Which of the following approaches best addresses the security and compliance requirements for application access and data segregation within Workspace ONE? Option A. Disable all conditional access policies to simplify user access and reduce the administrative overhead of managing device compliance checks. Option B. Grant all users full access to all financial applications to ensure maximum productivity and minimize user complaints about access restrictions. Option C. Focus solely on enforcing device compliance through Workspace ONE, allowing all users to access all applications once their device is deemed compliant, without considering specific application access needs. Option D. Implement granular application assignment based on user groups and roles, coupled with conditional access policies that enforce device compliance and user authentication before granting access to sensitive applications. Correct answer is D. Implement granular application assignment based on user groups and roles, coupled with conditional access policies that enforce device compliance and user authentication before granting access to sensitive applications. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in advanced Workspace ONE integrations, balancing the need for robust security with user experience and operational efficiency. Specifically, the scenario highlights the complexities of managing application access and data security across diverse device types and user roles within a regulated environment. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the principles of least privilege and data segregation, as mandated by general IT security best practices and potentially specific industry regulations. Though for this exam, we focus on the technical implementation within the Workspace ONE framework itself, assuming underlying compliance requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core security principles of Workspace ONE. By leveraging granular access controls and conditional access policies, administrators can ensure that users only access the applications and data they are authorized to, based on contexts such as device compliance, location, and user group. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, minimizing the attack surface and potential for data breaches. Furthermore, it allows for a dynamic and adaptive security posture, which is crucial in modern IT environments. An incorrect approach that involves granting broad access to all applications for all users, regardless of role or device status, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates the principle of least privilege, increasing the risk of unauthorized data access and potential compliance violations if sensitive data is exposed. Another incorrect approach, such as disabling all conditional access policies to simplify management, also fails ethically and professionally by creating a security vacuum. This approach prioritizes administrative ease over the fundamental security requirements of protecting corporate data and user privacy, which could lead to severe compliance breaches and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on device compliance without considering application-specific access needs, is incomplete. While device compliance is important, it doesn't address the nuances of user roles and the sensitivity of different applications, leading to either over-restriction or under-protection. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the organization's security policies, compliance requirements, and the specific needs of different user groups and applications. This involves mapping user roles to required application access and data sensitivity levels. Subsequently, they should design Workspace ONE policies that implement these requirements using the most granular controls available, prioritizing conditional access and least privilege. Regular review and auditing of these policies are essential to adapt to evolving threats and business needs. Question 6. Implementation of a secure and flexible access control strategy for a hybrid workforce utilizing VMware Workspace ONE, integrating with a third-party identity provider, IDP, to manage user authentication, while ensuring granular access to sensitive applications based on device compliance and user group membership for both corporate managed and BYOD devices. Option A. Rely solely on the third-party IDP to enforce all access decisions, without implementing Workspace ONE device compliance or application-specific access policies. Option B. Bypass the third-party IDP integration and manage all authentication and authorization directly within Workspace ONE for all device types, including BYOD. Option C. Configure Workspace ONE conditional access policies to leverage the third-party IDP for authentication, and then enforce granular access controls based on device compliance status, user group membership, and application sensitivity levels, supporting both managed and BYOD scenarios. Option D. Implement broad access policies in Workspace ONE that grant access to all users and devices regardless of their security posture or the sensitivity of the application. The correct answer is C. Configure Workspace ONE conditional access policies to leverage the third-party IDP for authentication, and then enforce granular access controls based on device compliance status, user group membership, and application sensitivity levels, supporting both managed and BYOD scenarios. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in advanced Workspace ONE integrations, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational demands of a dynamic user base and diverse application landscape. The core difficulty lies in defining and enforcing granular access policies that are both effective against sophisticated threats and practical for end users and administrators. The integration of a third-party identity provider, IDP, adds complexity, requiring careful consideration of trust relationships, attribute mapping, and the potential for misconfigurations that could lead to security vulnerabilities or access disruptions. The requirement to support both managed and BYOD devices further complicates policy design, as different device postures necessitate varying levels of access and control. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach leverages Workspace ONE conditional access policies, specifically by integrating with the third-party IDP for authentication, and then applying granular access controls based on device posture, user group, and application sensitivity. This method aligns with best practices for zero-trust architectures, where access is never implicitly trusted and is continuously evaluated. By using the IDP for initial authentication, and then relying on Workspace ONE policy engine to enforce context-aware access decisions, the organization can ensure that only authenticated and authorized users on compliant devices can access sensitive applications. This approach is professionally sound because it minimizes the attack surface by enforcing the principle of least privilege and provides a dynamic security posture that adapts to changing conditions. It also adheres to the implicit regulatory expectation of maintaining data confidentiality and integrity by controlling access based on verified attributes and device health. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that relies solely on the third-party IDP for all access decisions, without leveraging Workspace ONE granular policy engine for device posture and application-specific controls, is professionally unacceptable. This creates a security gap, as the IDP may not have visibility into device compliance or the ability to enforce application-level restrictions. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance by failing to adequately protect sensitive data from unauthorized access by noncompliant devices. Another incorrect approach would be to implement overly broad access policies that grant access to all users and devices regardless of their security posture or the sensitivity of the application. This is a significant security and regulatory failure, as it directly contradicts the principles of data protection and access control mandated by most data privacy regulations. It increases the risk of data breaches and unauthorized access, leading to severe reputational damage and potential legal repercussions. Finally, an approach that bypasses the integration with the third-party IDP and attempts to manage authentication and authorization solely within Workspace ONE for all scenarios, including BYOD, would be inefficient and potentially insecure. This would create a fragmented identity management strategy, increase administrative overhead, and could lead to inconsistencies in security enforcement. It fails to leverage existing trusted identity infrastructure and introduces unnecessary complexity, increasing the likelihood of misconfiguration and security vulnerabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with such integrations must adopt a risk-based approach. This involves understanding the organization's threat landscape, regulatory obligations, and business requirements. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer granular control, continuous monitoring, and adaptability. When integrating with external systems like third-party IDPs, thorough testing of trust relationships, attribute flows, and policy enforcement is paramount. Professionals should always aim for a unified and context-aware security posture that aligns with zero trust principles, ensuring that access is granted based on verified identity, device health, and the principle of least privilege. This proactive and layered security strategy is essential for maintaining compliance and protecting organizational assets. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a core productivity application used across the organization, requiring an immediate patch. The integration of this application with VMware Workspace ONE is extensive, impacting user access to various internal resources and data. What is the most professionally responsible approach to deploying the security patch? Option A. Provide users with a temporary workaround for the vulnerability and postpone the patch deployment until a less disruptive time. Option B. Implement a phased rollout of the patch, beginning with a small pilot group of users to validate its effectiveness and identify any potential operational impacts before a full deployment. Option C. Immediately deploy the patch to all users to ensure the fastest possible mitigation of the vulnerability. Option D. Delay the patch deployment indefinitely until a more stable version of the application is released by the vendor. The correct answer is C. Immediately deploy the patch to all users to ensure the fastest possible mitigation of the vulnerability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, where a critical security vulnerability is discovered in a widely deployed application. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to protect sensitive corporate data with the operational impact of enforcing a rapid remediation. The urgency of the vulnerability necessitates swift action, but the potential disruption to user productivity and business operations requires a carefully considered approach. The integration of Workspace ONE with various backend systems and the reliance of users on specific application functionalities amplify the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the security patch, starting with a pilot group of users. This aligns with best professional practices for change management and risk mitigation. By testing the patch on a limited subset of users, the IT team can validate its effectiveness in addressing the vulnerability and, crucially, identify any unintended consequences or compatibility issues with other integrated systems or user workflows. This proactive validation minimizes the risk of widespread disruption. Furthermore, this approach allows for timely communication and support for the pilot group, refining the deployment strategy before a broader rollout. This methodical process ensures compliance with internal security policies and industry best practices for incident response and vulnerability management, which prioritize data protection while minimizing operational impact. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately deploy the patch to all users without any prior testing. This is professionally unacceptable as it disregards the potential for unforeseen technical issues, such as application conflicts, performance degradation, or complete system outages. Such a broad, untested deployment could lead to significant business disruption, data loss, and a failure to meet service-level agreements, representing a significant ethical and professional lapse in due diligence. Another incorrect approach is to delay the deployment indefinitely, citing potential user impact. This is also professionally unacceptable because it prioritizes convenience over security. Leaving a known critical vulnerability unaddressed exposes sensitive corporate data to significant risk of compromise, which is a direct violation of data protection responsibilities and could have severe legal and reputational consequences. The professional duty is to protect organizational assets. A third incorrect approach is to only provide a workaround without deploying the actual patch. While workarounds can be a temporary measure, relying solely on them for a critical vulnerability is insufficient. Workarounds are often prone to user error, may not fully mitigate the risk, and do not address the root cause. This approach fails to implement a robust and permanent security solution, leaving the organization exposed and demonstrating a lack of commitment to comprehensive security posture management. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured incident response and change management framework. This involves 1. Rapid assessment of the vulnerability impact and scope. 2. Development of a remediation plan that includes testing and phased deployment. 3. Clear and timely communication with stakeholders, including affected users and management. 4. Execution of the plan with continuous monitoring and validation. 5. Post-deployment review to capture lessons learned. This systematic approach ensures that security risks are managed effectively, while minimizing operational disruption and maintaining user trust. Question 8. The control framework reveals a new Workspace ONE integration designed to streamline cross-departmental data sharing. This integration will involve access to sensitive customer information across multiple geographic regions. Given the regulatory landscape, what is the most prudent approach to ensure compliance with data privacy and security mandates, particularly concerning the principle of least privilege and data minimization? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program in a representative subset of regions and user groups, meticulously validating security policies, access controls, and data handling mechanisms before a full-scale deployment. Option B. Prioritize the technical functionality of the integration, deferring detailed reviews of data access and privacy policies until after the initial deployment. Option C. Implement the integration with broad access permissions, initially to ensure all users can leverage its capabilities, with plans to refine permissions later based on feedback. Option D. Immediately deploy the integration across all regions to maximize operational efficiency and user access, addressing any identified issues reactively. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program in a representative subset of regions and user groups, meticulously validating security policies, access controls, and data handling mechanisms before a full-scale deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in advanced Workspace ONE integrations, balancing the need for granular access control and data security with the operational efficiency required by a global organization. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the principles of least privilege and data minimization within the context of a complex, multi-region deployment, while also adhering to the specific regulatory requirements of the exam's jurisdiction. The potential for misconfiguration leading to data breaches or non-compliance is high, demanding a thorough understanding of both the technology and the governing principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the new integration, starting with a pilot group that mirrors the diversity of the broader user base in terms of roles, regions, and device types. This pilot phase is crucial for validating the security policies, access controls, and data handling mechanisms against real-world usage patterns and potential edge cases. Specifically, it allows for the verification that the Workspace ONE policies correctly enforce the principle of least privilege, ensuring that users only have access to the data and applications necessary for their roles, and that data is only collected and processed as strictly required by the integration's legitimate business purpose. This approach aligns with best practices for risk management and compliance, allowing for iterative refinement before a full deployment, thereby minimizing the risk of widespread security incidents or regulatory violations. Correct approach is analysis. Implementing the integration across all regions simultaneously without a pilot phase represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the opportunity to identify and rectify potential security vulnerabilities or policy misconfigurations that could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data or the collection of excessive personal information, thereby violating data minimization principles. It also fails to adequately test the integration's compliance with regional data residency and privacy regulations, which can vary significantly. Deploying the integration with overly broad access permissions to expedite the rollout is another critical failure. This directly contravenes the principle of least privilege, exposing sensitive data to users who do not require it for their job functions. Such an approach significantly increases the attack surface and the risk of accidental or malicious data exfiltration, leading to severe regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Focusing solely on technical functionality without a comprehensive review of data handling and access control policies before deployment is also professionally unacceptable. This oversight can lead to the integration inadvertently collecting or exposing data beyond its stated purpose, or failing to implement necessary safeguards for sensitive information. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence regarding data privacy and security, which are paramount under most regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with advanced Workspace One integrations must adopt a risk-based, iterative approach. This involves a thorough understanding of the integration's data flows, the sensitivity of the data involved, and the applicable regulatory landscape. Before any deployment, a detailed security and compliance review should be conducted, focusing on access controls, data minimization, and the enforcement of the principle of least privilege. A phased rollout, beginning with a controlled pilot, is essential for validating these controls in a live environment. Continuous monitoring and auditing post-deployment are also critical to ensure ongoing compliance and security. This systematic process allows for the proactive identification and mitigation of risks, ensuring that the integration meets both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 9. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of device check-in from a specific geographic region, coinciding with a spike in failed authentication attempts for a subset of users accessing sensitive applications via Workspace ONE. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to balance security, compliance, and operational continuity? Option A. Log the anomaly for future review and continue normal operations, assuming the pattern is a temporary network issue or a false positive from the monitoring system. Option B. Trigger a broad system-wide security audit of all Workspace ONE components and connected applications to identify the root cause of the authentication failures. Option C. Initiate a targeted investigation by isolating the affected user accounts and devices for forensic analysis, while simultaneously notifying the security and compliance teams for guidance on data handling and potential breach notification requirements. Option D. Immediately revoke all user access to sensitive applications and initiate a full remote wipe of all devices associated with the affected user accounts to prevent any potential data exfiltration. The correct answer is C. Initiate a targeted investigation by isolating the affected user accounts and devices for forensic analysis, while simultaneously notifying the security and compliance teams for guidance on data handling and potential breach notification requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where security and compliance are paramount. The monitoring system has detected an anomaly that could indicate a security breach or a policy violation. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate response without causing undue disruption to business operations or compromising sensitive data. The need for swift action must be balanced against the risk of false positives and the potential impact of an incorrect remediation. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data privacy regulation, internal security policies, and the operational requirements of the Workspace ONE environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation that prioritizes data integrity and regulatory compliance. This includes isolating the affected devices or user accounts to prevent further potential compromise, gathering detailed logs and forensic data for analysis, and consulting with the relevant security and compliance teams. This aligns with best practices for incident response, which emphasize containment, eradication, and recovery. Specifically, it adheres to principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that data is only accessed and processed as necessary for the investigation and remediation. The focus on evidence preservation is critical for any potential audit or legal proceedings, and for fulfilling regulatory obligations related to breach notification and reporting. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately revoking all user access and wiping all devices. This is overly aggressive and could lead to significant business disruption and data loss for legitimate users. It fails to consider the principle of proportionality in security responses and may violate data privacy regulations by indiscriminately processing user data without sufficient justification. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the alert, assuming it is a false positive. This is a critical failure in security posture and regulatory compliance. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could result in a significant security incident going undetected, leading to data breaches and noncompliance with regulations that mandate timely detection and response to security threats. A third incorrect approach is to immediately escalate to a full system audit without initial containment. This can be inefficient and may alert potential attackers to the investigation, compromising the integrity of the evidence. It also risks unnecessary disruption and resource allocation before the severity and nature of the anomaly are understood. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to security incidents. This involves 1. Initial assessment and triage to understand the scope and impact of the anomaly. 2. Containment to prevent further damage or spread. 3. Detailed investigation and analysis, preserving evidence. 4. Remediation and recovery. 5. Post-incident review and lessons learned. Throughout this process, adherence to relevant data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on jurisdiction, and internal security policies is paramount. Communication with stakeholders, including legal and compliance departments, is essential. Question 10. Investigation of how to configure VMware Workspace 1 to ensure compliance with data protection regulations that mandate strict access controls and audit trails for sensitive user data, while also considering the impact on end-user productivity. Option A. Prioritize user convenience by allowing unrestricted access to all applications and data through Workspace 1, with minimal security checks to maximize productivity. Option B. Disable advanced security features within Workspace 1 to streamline the login process and reduce user friction, assuming that basic password protection is sufficient for compliance. Option C. Design the Workspace 1 deployment to implement multi-factor authentication for all user access, enforce granular role-based access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and configure comprehensive logging and auditing of all administrative and user actions. Option D. Rely solely on the default security configurations provided by VMware Workspace 1, without conducting a specific assessment against the organization's regulatory obligations. The correct answer is C. Design the Workspace 1 deployment to implement multi-factor authentication for all user access, enforce granular role-based access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and configure comprehensive logging and auditing of all administrative and user actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the practicalities of user experience and operational efficiency within a regulated environment. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying the specific requirements of the VMware Workspace 1 platform in conjunction with the regulatory framework governing data handling and access control. The organization must ensure that its Workspace 1 deployment adheres to all applicable laws and guidelines without unduly hindering legitimate business operations or creating an overly burdensome user experience. This requires a nuanced understanding of both technical capabilities and regulatory intent. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the specific regulatory requirements relevant to the data being managed by Workspace 1 and the user access patterns. This includes identifying which data is considered sensitive or regulated, understanding the permissible methods for data access and transmission, and ensuring that the Workspace 1 configuration enforces these controls. For example, If the jurisdiction mandates specific data residency requirements or encryption standards for certain types of data, the design must incorporate these. The approach should prioritize implementing granular access controls, robust authentication mechanisms, like multi-factor authentication, and comprehensive logging and auditing capabilities, all of which are foundational to demonstrating compliance. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for accountability, which are common themes in regulatory frameworks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket policy of disabling all advanced security features to improve user experience is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach directly contravenes the spirit and often the letter of regulations designed to protect sensitive data. It demonstrates a disregard for compliance obligations and exposes the organization to substantial risks, including data breaches, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on default Workspace ONE security settings without a specific assessment against regulatory mandates. Default settings are often designed for general security best practices, but may not meet the stringent requirements of specific industry regulations or data protection laws. This can lead to unintentional noncompliance, as critical controls might be missing or inadequately configured. Finally, prioritizing user convenience over all security and compliance considerations is a critical failure. While user experience is important, it cannot supersede legal and ethical obligations to protect data. This approach creates a high-risk environment where data is vulnerable to unauthorized access, modification, or disclosure, leading to severe legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach to Workspace ONE design and integration, always starting with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations and guidelines relevant to the organization's data and operations. 2. Mapping these regulatory requirements to specific Workspace ONE features and functionalities. 3. Designing the Workspace ONE environment to meet or exceed these requirements, prioritizing security and compliance. 4. Implementing controls that are both effective and as user-friendly as possible, seeking a balance rather than extreme. 5. Regularly reviewing and auditing the configuration to ensure ongoing compliance and adapt to changes in regulations or business needs. This systematic process ensures that technical solutions are aligned with legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 11. What factors determine the appropriate data protection controls and contractual clauses when integrating a third-party SaaS application with VMware Workspace ONE, ensuring compliance with the specified regulatory framework? Option A. The technical specifications of the Workspace ONE environment and the availability of standard API connectors. Option B. The SaaS application's data processing activities, data residency requirements, and the vendor's adherence to data protection principles outlined in the regulatory framework. Option C. The marketing materials provided by the SaaS vendor, highlighting their security features. Option D. The perceived ease of integration and the cost-effectiveness of the SaaS solution. The correct answer is B. The SaaS application's data processing activities, data residency requirements, and the vendor's adherence to data protection principles outlined in the regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the technical requirements of integrating a new SaaS application with Workspace ONE against stringent data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the data processed and stored by the SaaS application, which will be accessed by end users via Workspace ONE, adheres to the specific data protection principles mandated by the relevant regulatory framework. Without a thorough understanding of these regulations, the integration could inadvertently lead to noncompliance, resulting in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive assessment of the SaaS application's data handling practices against the specified regulatory framework. This includes scrutinizing data encryption methods, data residency requirements, access control mechanisms, and the SaaS provider's own compliance certifications. By prioritizing a data privacy impact assessment, DPIA, and ensuring contractual agreements with the SaaS vendor explicitly address data protection obligations, the organization demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and privacy by default, which are fundamental to many data protection laws. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical feasibility without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. For instance, proceeding with integration based only on API compatibility or ease of deployment ignores the critical aspect of data protection. This could lead to the unauthorized transfer of personal data, inadequate security measures for sensitive information, or failure to meet data subject rights, all of which constitute regulatory and ethical failures. Another incorrect approach might be to assume the SaaS vendor is compliant without independent verification. This abdication of responsibility is a direct violation of due diligence requirements often stipulated in regulations, placing the organization at significant risk. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multidisciplinary team including IT security, legal counsel, and compliance officers. The framework should prioritize understanding the regulatory landscape, conducting thorough risk assessments, including DPIA, establishing clear contractual obligations with third-party vendors, and implementing ongoing monitoring and auditing processes. This systematic approach ensures that technical solutions are implemented within a robust compliance framework, safeguarding both the organization and its users' data. Question 12. When evaluating the integration of a new software as a service (SaaS) application with VMware Workspace ONE, what is the most critical step to ensure regulatory compliance regarding user data privacy and security? Option A. Proceed with the integration and address any potential compliance issues that arise after the application is deployed and in use. Option B. Obtain and independently verify the SaaS provider's compliance certifications and review their data processing agreements to ensure alignment with the relevant regulatory framework before integration. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment and user access to the new application, deferring detailed compliance checks to a later, less critical phase. Option D. Rely solely on the SaaS provider's self-attestation that their application meets all applicable regulatory requirements. The correct answer is B. Obtain and independently verify the SaaS provider's compliance certifications and review their data processing agreements to ensure alignment with the relevant regulatory framework before integration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new technologies and the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security within the VMware Workspace ONE ecosystem. The need to integrate a new SaaS application with Workspace ONE for streamlined user access and management requires careful consideration of how sensitive user and application data will be handled, stored, and transmitted, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the exam's jurisdiction. The challenge lies in balancing the business imperative for agility with the non-negotiable obligation to protect user data and maintain system integrity according to established legal and ethical standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and compliance validation before integration. This proactive stance ensures that all data handling practices associated with the new SaaS application align with the regulatory framework. Specifically, it involves verifying the SaaS provider's compliance certifications, understanding their data processing agreements, and confirming that their security measures meet or exceed the mandated standards for data protection, access control, and incident response. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, embedding compliance from the outset, which is a cornerstone of responsible IT governance and a direct reflection of regulatory expectations. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with integration based solely on the SaaS provider's self-attestation of compliance is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements mandated by regulatory frameworks, which often place the responsibility on the integrating organization to verify compliance. Relying on self-attestation without independent verification can lead to significant regulatory violations, fines, and reputational damage if the SaaS provider's claims are inaccurate or their practices fall short of legal requirements. Another incorrect approach, which is to integrate the application and address compliance concerns reactively post-deployment, is also professionally unacceptable. This reactive posture significantly increases the risk of data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data handling and retention policies. Regulatory bodies typically expect a proactive approach to compliance, and a reactive strategy often results in costly remediation efforts, potential legal penalties, and a loss of trust from users and stakeholders. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured, risk-based approach. First, identify all relevant regulatory requirements pertaining to data privacy, security, and application integration. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed integration, focusing on data flows, access controls, and potential vulnerabilities. Third, engage with the SaaS provider to obtain detailed information about their security and compliance posture, including relevant certifications and audit reports. Fourth, implement technical and administrative controls within Workspace ONE to enforce compliance, such as conditional access policies, data loss prevention, DLP rules, and robust authentication mechanisms. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continuous compliance and to detect and respond to any deviations or emerging risks. This systematic process ensures that technological advancements are implemented responsibly and in full accordance with legal and ethical obligations. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a data breach due to insufficient access controls within the Workspace ONE environment, specifically concerning sensitive user data. Which of the following approaches best addresses this identified risk in a manner compliant with data protection principles? Option A. Rely solely on endpoint encryption for all devices to protect sensitive user data, regardless of access permissions. Option B. Increase the frequency of security awareness training for all users to educate them on the importance of data security. Option C. Disable multi-factor authentication, MFA, for administrative accounts to streamline access and reduce login friction. Option D. Implement granular, role-based access controls RBAC within Workspace ONE to enforce the principle of least privilege for accessing sensitive user data. The correct answer is D. Implement granular, role-based access controls RBAC within Workspace ONE to enforce the principle of least privilege for accessing sensitive user data. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a data breach due to insufficient access controls within the Workspace ONE environment, specifically concerning sensitive user data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing security imperatives with operational efficiency and user experience, all while adhering to strict regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in implementing robust security measures that do not unduly hinder legitimate access or create administrative overhead, and ensuring these measures are demonstrably compliant with relevant data protection laws. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified high-risk area by implementing granular, role-based access controls, RBAC, within Workspace ONE. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, a fundamental security concept mandated by many data protection regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If this were a European context, or similar U.S. privacy laws like HIPAA for healthcare data or CCPA for California consumer data. By restricting access to sensitive data based on job function and necessity, the organization minimizes the attack surface and the potential impact of a breach. This proactive, layered security strategy is a cornerstone of compliant data handling and risk management. An incorrect approach that involves simply increasing the frequency of security awareness training without addressing the underlying technical vulnerability fails to mitigate the identified risk effectively. While training is important, it does not prevent unauthorized access if the system's controls are inherently weak. This approach represents a regulatory failure by not implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure data security, as often required by data protection laws. Another incorrect approach, such as disabling multi-factor authentication, MFA, for administrative accounts to streamline access, is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. MFA is a critical security control designed to prevent unauthorized access, and its removal directly contradicts best practices and often specific regulatory requirements for protecting privileged accounts. This action significantly increases the risk of a breach and demonstrates a disregard for data protection obligations. A further incorrect approach, like relying solely on endpoint encryption without addressing access controls, is also professionally unacceptable. While encryption protects data at rest, it does not prevent unauthorized users from accessing data if they have legitimate credentials or if the access controls are misconfigured. This approach fails to implement a comprehensive security strategy and neglects a key risk identified in the matrix, potentially violating regulatory mandates for data security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, identifying specific vulnerabilities and their potential impact. This should be followed by a review of applicable regulatory requirements and industry best practices. Solutions should then be designed to directly address the identified risks in a layered and comprehensive manner, prioritizing technical controls that enforce security policies. Continuous monitoring and regular reassessment of risks and controls are also crucial to maintain compliance and security posture. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a new third-party identity provider, IDP, is being integrated with VMware Workspace ONE to streamline user authentication. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential security and compliance risks introduced by this integration? Option A. Rely exclusively on the security certifications and internal audit reports provided by the third-party IDP for assurance, without performing an independent assessment of the integration. Option B. Prioritize the user experience benefits of the IDP integration and implement it quickly, deferring detailed security and compliance reviews to a later date. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates the security posture of the third-party IDP, its integration protocols with Workspace ONE, and the resulting data flows and access controls. Option D. Assume the third-party IDP security is adequate due to its market reputation, and proceed with the integration without further security review. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates the security posture of the third-party IDP, its integration protocols with Workspace ONE, and the resulting data flows and access controls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Workspace ONE deployments where the integration of a third-party identity provider, IDP, introduces new attack vectors and potential compliance gaps. The challenge lies in balancing the need for seamless user authentication with robust security controls and adherence to data privacy regulations. Specifically, the introduction of a new IDP requires a thorough risk assessment to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited to gain unauthorized access to sensitive corporate data managed by Workspace ONE. Failure to conduct this assessment properly can lead to data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that specifically evaluates the security posture of the chosen third-party IDP and its integration points with Workspace ONE. This includes examining the IDP's authentication protocols, e.g., SAML OAuth, its data handling practices, its compliance certifications, e.g., SOC 2, ISO 27001, and the security configurations within Workspace ONE that govern the trust relationship with the IDP. This approach aligns with best practices for secure system integration and is implicitly supported by general IT security principles and frameworks that emphasize proactive risk identification and mitigation. While specific regulations for this exam are not provided, the principle of due diligence in assessing third-party risks is a universal requirement for responsible IT management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the third-party IDP is a reputable vendor, its security is inherently sufficient and requires no further scrutiny. This overlooks the shared responsibility model in security and the potential for misconfigurations or vulnerabilities specific to the integration. Failure to perform due diligence is a significant ethical and professional lapse, as it exposes the organization to undue risk. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the user experience benefits of the IDP without adequately assessing the security implications. While user experience is important, it should not come at the expense of security and compliance. Prioritizing convenience over security can lead to vulnerabilities that compromise data integrity and confidentiality, violating fundamental security principles. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the IDP's own internal security audits without independent verification or a specific assessment of the integration's security. The IDP's audits may not cover the specific use case or the integration points with Workspace ONE, leaving potential gaps unaddressed. This lack of a tailored risk assessment for the integrated solution is a critical oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic risk assessment methodology that begins with identifying all assets and data flows involved in the integration. This should be followed by identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing the likelihood and impact of these risks, and then determining appropriate mitigation strategies. For third-party integrations, this process must include a thorough vetting of the vendor's security practices, an independent assessment of the integration's security configuration, and ongoing monitoring. A risk register should be maintained and regularly reviewed to ensure that risks are managed effectively throughout the life cycle of the integration. Question 15. Compliance review shows that a new third-party SaaS application has been integrated with VMware Workspace 1 to streamline user onboarding, but no formal risk assessment was conducted for this integration prior to its deployment. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Implement security controls based on general best practices for SaaS integrations and past similar projects without a specific assessment of this new integration. Option B. Proceed with the integration, assuming the SaaS vendor's security measures are adequate and that past integration experiences are sufficient to cover potential issues. Option C. Initiate a formal risk assessment specifically for the integration of the SaaS application with Workspace 1 to identify and mitigate potential security and compliance risks. Option D. Focus on verifying the technical connectivity and data mapping between Workspace 1 and the SaaS application, as this is the primary technical concern. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal risk assessment specifically for the integration of the SaaS application with Workspace 1 to identify and mitigate potential security and compliance risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where the rapid adoption of new technologies, such as integrating a third-party SaaS application with Workspace 1, can outpace formal risk assessment processes. The challenge lies in balancing the business need for agility and innovation with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant posture. The integration introduces new attack vectors and potential data leakage points, requiring a proactive and thorough risk assessment to identify, analyze, and mitigate these threats before they can be exploited. The absence of a documented risk assessment for this specific integration creates a significant compliance gap and exposes the organization to potential security incidents and regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal risk assessment process specifically for the integration of the new SaaS application with Workspace 1. This aligns with best practices for IT security and compliance, as mandated by general principles of data protection and IT governance frameworks that are implicitly expected to be followed in a professional setting, even if not explicitly detailed in the 5V0-62. 19 syllabus. A formal risk assessment allows for the systematic identification of threats, e.g., unauthorized access to sensitive data, data exfiltration, misconfiguration of integration points, vulnerabilities, e.g., weak authentication mechanisms, insecure API endpoints, lack of data encryption, and potential impacts, e.g., financial loss, reputational damage, regulatory fines. Based on this analysis, appropriate mitigation strategies can be developed and implemented, such as implementing multi-factor authentication for the integration, encrypting data in transit and at rest, and establishing strict access controls. This proactive approach ensures that security and compliance are embedded into the integration process, rather than being an afterthought. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the integration without any risk assessment, relying solely on the vendor's security claims, is professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a severe disregard for due diligence and regulatory compliance, implicitly assumes the vendor's security posture is sufficient without independent verification, which is a critical failure. This could lead to regulatory violations if data protection laws are breached due to the vendor's shortcomings or misconfigurations. Implementing security controls based on anecdotal evidence or past experiences with similar integrations, without a specific assessment of the current integration's unique risks, is also professionally unsound. While past experience is valuable, each integration has its own specific technical architecture, data flows, and potential threat landscape. Relying on assumptions can lead to overlooking critical, context-specific risks thereby failing to adequately protect sensitive data and potentially violating compliance requirements. Focusing solely on the technical implementation details of the integration, such as API connectivity and data mapping, without a corresponding risk assessment, is an incomplete and dangerous approach. Technical implementation is only one facet of a secure integration. The absence of a risk assessment means that the potential security and compliance implications of these technical choices are not being evaluated, leaving the organization vulnerable to threats that are not purely technical in nature, such as policy violations or insider threats. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a risk-based approach to all IT initiatives, especially those involving integrations and third-party services. The decision-making process should begin with understanding the business objectives and then systematically evaluating the associated risks. This involves 1. Identifying all potential risks to data security, privacy, and compliance. 2. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Prioritizing risks based on their severity. 4. Developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. 5. Continuously monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of these controls. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with regulatory expectations and ethical responsibilities. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that a proposed integration of a third-party identity provider, IDP, with VMware Workspace 1 is expected to significantly improve user authentication efficiency and access to cloud applications. However, concerns have been raised regarding the security posture of the third-party IDP and the potential implications for sensitive organizational data. Which of the following approaches best addresses the inherent risks associated with this integration? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluate the third-party IDP security controls and compliance, and develop specific mitigation strategies before proceeding with the integration. Option B. Proceed with the integration immediately to capitalize on the anticipated productivity gains, assuming the third-party IDP has adequate security measures in place. Option C. Rely solely on the third-party IDP vendor's security certifications and documentation without conducting an independent risk assessment specific to the integration. Option D. Implement the integration and then initiate a post-implementation security audit to identify any issues that may arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluate the third-party IDP's security controls and compliance, and develop specific mitigation strategies before proceeding with the integration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where a new integration is proposed that could significantly enhance user productivity, but also introduces potential security risks. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for innovation and efficiency with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant operational posture. The integration of a third-party identity provider, IDP, with Workspace 1, while offering benefits, necessitates a thorough risk assessment to identify, analyze, and mitigate potential vulnerabilities that could impact data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This requires a deep understanding of both the technical implications of the integration and the relevant regulatory landscape governing data protection and security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with the third-party IDP integration. This includes evaluating the IDP security posture, data handling practices, compliance certifications, and the potential impact of a compromise on sensitive user and organizational data. The assessment should then lead to the development of specific mitigation strategies, such as implementing robust authentication mechanisms, data encryption, access controls, and continuous monitoring. This aligns with best practices for information security and regulatory requirements that mandate organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data and ensure system security. For example, if this were a US-based scenario, this would align with NIST SB 800-53 controls for risk assessment and system security. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the integration without a formal risk assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a failure to adhere to principles of responsible data handling and security. This approach exposes the organization to potential data breaches, noncompliance with data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable, or CCPA in California, and reputational damage. Proceeding with the integration based solely on the perceived productivity gains, without a thorough technical evaluation of the IDP's security and the integration's potential attack vectors, is also professionally unacceptable. This overlooks critical security considerations and can lead to the introduction of vulnerabilities that are difficult to detect and remediate later. It violates the principle of least privilege and the need for secure system design. Relying on the third-party IDP vendor's assurances of security without independent verification or a tailored risk assessment is another failure. While vendor claims are a starting point, organizations have a responsibility to conduct their own due diligence to ensure that the vendor's security practices meet the organization's specific risk tolerance and regulatory obligations. This approach outsources critical risk management responsibilities, which is not permissible under most regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework. This begins with understanding the business objectives and the proposed technical solution. The next critical step is to identify all potential risks, both technical and operational, associated with the integration. This involves threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, and impact assessment. Based on the identified risks, mitigation strategies should be developed and prioritized. The decision to proceed with the integration should be contingent on the successful implementation of these mitigation strategies to an acceptable level of risk. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment of risks are also crucial components of a mature security program. This systematic approach ensures that security and compliance are integral to the design and implementation process, rather than an afterthought. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows a critical risk assessment scenario for a VMware Workspace ONE deployment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a comprehensive and effective risk management strategy for identifying and prioritizing potential security threats and vulnerabilities? Option A. Prioritizing risks based on a detailed analysis of potential threats, their likelihood of occurrence, and the potential impact on business operations and data security. Option B. Focusing primarily on the technical intricacies of the Workspace ONE integration points and their potential failure modes. Option C. Assessing risks based on the frequency of discussions about specific vulnerabilities within internal IT forums. Option D. Ranking risks by the perceived ease with which mitigation controls can be implemented. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing risks based on a detailed analysis of potential threats, their likelihood of occurrence, and the potential impact on business operations and data security. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in the risk assessment process for a VMware Workspace ONE deployment. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying and prioritizing risks that could impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive data and user access, especially within the context of the 5v0-62. 19 exams implied regulatory environment, which focuses on enterprise IT security and data protection best practices. The chosen approach must align with established risk management frameworks and demonstrate an understanding of potential vulnerabilities specific to integrated identity and access management solutions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically analyzes potential threats and vulnerabilities against the likelihood of their occurrence and the potential impact. This aligns with standard risk assessment methodologies that emphasize a structured, evidence-based approach to identify, analyze, and evaluate risks. By focusing on the potential impact on business operations and data security, it prioritizes mitigation efforts where they are most needed, ensuring compliance with general data protection principles and security mandates that are implicitly understood within the scope of enterprise IT certifications like this one. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining a secure and functional Workspace ONE environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical complexity of the integration, without considering the business impact or likelihood of exploitation, is professionally unacceptable. It fails to prioritize risks effectively, potentially leading to misallocation of resources and overlooking critical security gaps. This approach neglects the fundamental purpose of risk assessment: to protect business assets and operations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the ease of implementation of mitigation strategies, rather than their effectiveness or the severity of the risk, is also professionally flawed. This can lead to addressing minor issues while leaving significant threats unmitigated, creating a false sense of security. It deviates from a risk-based decision-making process. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without a structured analysis of threats, vulnerabilities, and impacts is professionally unsound. This subjective method lacks the rigor required for effective risk management and can lead to biased assessments and inadequate security controls, potentially violating implicit organizational policies and industry standards for due diligence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the scope of the assessment. 2. Identifying assets and their criticality. 3. Identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities. 4. Analyzing the likelihood of threats exploiting vulnerabilities. 5. Determining the potential impact of successful exploitation. 6. Evaluating and prioritizing risks based on likelihood and impact. 7. Developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. 8. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that an organization is considering integrating a third-party identity provider, IDP, with VMware Workspace 1 to streamline user authentication for a new cloud-based application. The IDP is known for its broad compatibility and ease of integration. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance and security during this integration process? Option A. Prioritize technical compatibility and performance metrics during the integration, deferring detailed security and compliance reviews until after the system is operational. Option B. Rely on informal assurances from the IDP vendor regarding their security practices and compliance, without requiring formal documentation or independent verification. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates the IDP's security posture, data handling practices, and compliance certifications against the organization's specific regulatory requirements and internal security policies. Option D. Proceed with the integration based on the IDP's vendor claims of broad compatibility and ease of use, assuming that its widespread adoption implies adequate security. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates the IDP's security posture, data handling practices, and compliance certifications against the organization's specific regulatory requirements and internal security policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in advanced Workspace 1 deployments, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the practicalities of user experience and operational efficiency. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with integrating a third-party identity provider, IDP, that may not have undergone the same rigorous vetting as native Workspace 1 authentication methods. The professional difficulty stems from the potential for misconfigurations, data leakage, or compliance violations if the integration is not approached with a thorough risk assessment framework. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive risk assessment that includes evaluating the IDP's security posture, data handling practices, and compliance certifications against the organization's specific regulatory requirements, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and proactive risk management inherent in IT security and compliance frameworks. By systematically identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies, the organization ensures that the integration enhances, rather than compromises, its security and compliance posture. This methodical approach is crucial for demonstrating adherence to regulatory obligations, such as those that might mandate data protection and secure access controls. An incorrect approach that bypasses a formal risk assessment and proceeds with integration based solely on perceived ease of implementation or vendor claims fails to meet professional and regulatory standards. This could lead to significant regulatory failures, such as violating data privacy regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on the jurisdiction, if the IDP mishandles sensitive user data, or failing to meet access control requirements mandated by industry-specific regulations. Another incorrect approach, which focuses only on technical compatibility without considering the IDP's security certifications or audit reports, ignores potential compliance gaps. This oversight could result in a breach of trust with users and regulators, as the organization would be unable to demonstrate that it has taken reasonable steps to secure user identities and associated data. Relying on anecdotal evidence or informal assurances from the IDP vendor, rather than documented evidence of their security practices and compliance, is also a critical failure, as it lacks the rigor required for auditable compliance. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with clearly defining the scope of the integration and identifying all potential stakeholders and their requirements. Next, a thorough threat modeling exercise should be conducted to understand potential attack vectors and vulnerabilities. This should be followed by a detailed assessment of the proposed IDP security controls, data privacy policies, and compliance certifications, cross-referenced against the organization's own policies and regulatory obligations. Mitigation strategies should then be developed, prioritized, and implemented, with ongoing monitoring and periodic reassessment to ensure continued effectiveness. Question 19. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for a new productivity application that promises enhanced collaboration. The IT department is under pressure to integrate this application into the VMware Workspace ONE environment quickly to meet business needs. Which of the following approaches best aligns with best practices for secure and compliant integration within the Workspace ONE framework? Option A. Implement a broad policy within Workspace ONE to block all new application integrations until a comprehensive, long-term vetting process can be established to avoid any potential risks. Option B. Integrate the application using basic deployment methods and rely on endpoint security solutions to mitigate any potential security risks introduced by the new application. Option C. Immediately deploy the application to all users through the Workspace ONE catalog to ensure rapid access and adoption, assuming the application vendor's security assurances are sufficient. Option D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment of the application, including its data handling and privacy implications, and then configure Workspace ONE policies to enforce relevant security controls and compliance requirements before widespread deployment. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment of the application, including its data handling and privacy implications, and then configure Workspace ONE policies to enforce relevant security controls and compliance requirements before widespread deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments, balancing the desire for rapid feature deployment with the imperative of maintaining a secure and compliant end-user computing posture. The pressure to integrate new, potentially unvetted applications into Workspace ONE can lead to shortcuts that bypass established security and compliance protocols. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands, ensuring that the integration process adheres to the organization's security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks without unduly hindering business agility. The need for deep technical understanding of Workspace ONE integration capabilities, coupled with a strong grasp of security best practices and compliance requirements, is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased, risk-assessed integration process. This involves thorough security vetting of the application, including its data handling practices and potential impact on existing security controls. It also necessitates a review of the application's compatibility with Workspace ONE security policies and compliance mandates, such as data residency requirements or specific industry regulations. The use of Workspace ONE built-in compliance engine and integration frameworks, e.g., API integrations, application catalog policies, ensures that the application is deployed in a controlled and monitored manner. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing security and compliance from the outset, minimizing the risk of data breaches, regulatory non-compliance, and operational disruption. It demonstrates a proactive and responsible approach to technology adoption. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately deploying the application to all users via the Workspace ONE catalog, without prior security review or policy enforcement. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses critical security checks, potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or misuse, and violates compliance requirements related to data protection and application vetting. Another incorrect approach is to implement a blanket policy that blocks all new application integrations, regardless of their security posture or business value. While seemingly secure, this approach is professionally unsound as it stifles innovation and operational efficiency, failing to meet the business's need for modern tools and potentially leading to shadow IT. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the application vendor's security claims without independent verification. This is a failure of due diligence and can lead to the adoption of insecure applications, violating the organization's responsibility to protect user data and maintain compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to application integration within Workspace ONE. This involves establishing clear criteria for application vetting, including security assessments, compliance checks, and user impact analysis. Leveraging Workspace ONE policy engine and integration capabilities allows for granular control over application deployment and access. When faced with pressure for rapid deployment, professionals must advocate for adherence to established processes, clearly articulating the risks associated with shortcuts. The decision-making process should prioritize the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations, ensuring that any integration enhances, rather than compromises, the overall end-user computing environment. Question 20. Compliance review shows that a critical third-party application integration with VMware Workspace ONE is currently configured with an administrative service account that possesses full administrative rights across the entire Workspace ONE environment, rather than specific delegated permissions for its operational needs. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for securing such integrations? Option A. Maintain the current configuration as it simplifies management and ensures the integration has all necessary permissions without potential operational delays due to permission restrictions. Option B. Reconfigure the integration service account to utilize specific, role-based access controls within Workspace ONE, granting only the minimum necessary permissions required for the application's functionality. Option C. Document the current broad administrative access granted to the integration service account and rely on network-level security controls to mitigate potential risks. Option D. Implement a custom script that directly modifies Workspace ONE configurations via less secure, direct API calls to grant the integration only the permissions it needs, bypassing standard Workspace ONE administrative interfaces. The correct answer is B. Reconfigure the integration service account to utilize specific, role-based access controls within Workspace ONE, granting only the minimum necessary permissions required for the application's functionality. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in advanced Workspace ONE integrations, where the need for granular access control clashes with the operational efficiency of broad administrative privileges. The professional challenge lies in balancing security posture with user experience and administrative overhead, all while adhering to the implicit regulatory and compliance expectations of a modern enterprise IT environment, even without explicit jurisdiction mandates for this specific exam. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen integration strategy does not inadvertently create security vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the principle of least privilege. By designing the integration to leverage specific, role-based access controls within Workspace ONE, it ensures that administrative functions are delegated only to those who require them for their specific duties. This minimizes the attack surface and reduces the risk of unauthorized access or accidental misconfiguration. This aligns with general IT security best practices that are universally understood and often implicitly expected by regulatory bodies, even if not explicitly detailed in the 5V0-62. syllabus. An incorrect approach that grants overly broad administrative privileges to a single integration service account fails to adhere to the principle of least privilege. This creates a significant security risk, as a compromise of that single account would grant extensive control over the entire Workspace ONE environment. This is professionally unacceptable, as it exposes the organization to potential data breaches and operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach that bypasses Workspace ONE native integration security features in favor of direct, less secure API calls introduces vulnerabilities. This is professionally unsound because it circumvents established security protocols designed to protect sensitive data and system integrity. It also likely violates internal security policies and could be seen as a failure to implement a secure by design integration. A third incorrect approach that relies on manual configuration and ad hoc adjustments for integration permissions is inefficient and prone to human error. This leads to inconsistencies, potential security gaps, and makes auditing and compliance difficult. It is professionally deficient, as it lacks the systematic and repeatable processes required for secure and manageable enterprise IT operations. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of the integration's requirements, a detailed understanding of Workspace ONE security features and best practices, and a commitment to the principle of least privilege. Decision makers should prioritize solutions that offer granular control, auditability, and adherence to established security frameworks. When in doubt, consulting security best practices and internal compliance guidelines is paramount.